Dean, we'll start with you and your 10th choice.
Okay, well, my 10th choice, I kind of discarded, like, the whole idea of, like, I mean, I have some blockbusters on the lower in the list, but my whole list is just really movies that I just think are great that you can just watch over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And the number 10 movie on my list is from France, and it's actually two movies. But one movie doesn't make sense without the other. Unlike, say, Godfather and Godfather Part 2, you can watch either one of those movies and they'll make sense alone. But these movies are actually pretty intricately connected story-wise. The movies are Jean de Florette and Man Under the Spring by Claude Berry.
Awesome movies.
Yeah, from Jean de Florette was released in '87 and tells the story of an elderly farmer who has a nephew coming in who's just landed his own plot of land, and this is in the south of France in the turn of the century, like around, I don't know, it might be 1930, I think, actually. But he comes in, gets a new plot of land next to his uncle's land, and starts trying to grow carnations on the land. But the unfortunate thing is that he doesn't have enough water. They're going through a drought, and there's not enough water coming to his land, and carnations drink up the water. So he has to go through kind of a terrible time trying to transport water from far away. Then he discovers his next door neighbor his new next door neighbor is a lawyer from the city who's decided to start being a farmer, and he's an amateur farmer. He comes in, and there's water on his land. There's a spring on his land. But
is there going to be any reason for us to watch the movie after you describe everything
no,
in it?
it's a huge movie. I'm setting up what the story is. They're basically trying to steal his spring without him knowing it. It's kind of a secret spring, and they're trying to steal the next door neighbor's spring. The next door neighbor is played by Gerard Depardieu. The uncle is played by Yves Montand, and the nephew is played by Daniel Auteuil. And this is an incredible sort of Greek tragedy that the magnitude of it is not felt with the ending of the first film, Jean de Florette, but really comes into flower, if you pardon me, pun, in the second hour of the second film, Man Under the Spring. It's you can of course imagine that it's beautifully shot by Bruno Nuiten, and it's got great scenery, but it's the performances of the three leads. And Emmanuel Bert in the second part plays Manon, who's the grown-up daughter of Jean de Florette, the novice farmer that comes in. And everybody is just superb, and it is really a really heartbreaking movie.
Oh, it is.
And when you get to the end of it, don't you agree, Jerry? When you get to the end of it and you find out everything, the history of the family, everything that is just devastating.
Oh, it is. Oh, it is. It's a. The other thing you walk away with, though, I don't know if you felt this way, Dean, or not, but we all walked away with it, is just how nasty and vicious the French peasants are.
Mm-hmm.
Just the nastiness. I mean, it really is like all small town kind of, there's this inherent utter nastiness, and they're just so vicious. And and you could say that also about any small town in America, for that matter, too. At certain times in our history. But it's a fascinating movie. I did not realize while you're going through the cast, and it's been a good 20 years since I've seen these. I did not realize so many famous French actors, who were young and very young at the time, were in that, though. So forgive me, I did not know that. That's awesome.
I'm just fascinated by the idea of having Gerard Depardieu as a neighbor. I mean, that's entertainment value enough.
As a hunchback's neighbor at
that.
Yeah,
it's sitting on an airplane. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's just an amazing film. You got to watch them both.
Those two together, it's your number 10. Jerry, what's top?
I'm going to go with. I think I went to see this twice in the 1 week when it opened. I dragged my Steve and his cousin to see it, and then my mom and my brother to see it. The Emerald Forest.
Boorman. John Boorman.
Yeah, the John Boorman. Yes. It's a fascinating movie. And if forgive me if we've talked about it on the show before, and I'm sure a couple of these we have, but it's just a beautifully shot movie. I mean, it's like the kind of thing John Boorman was really known for. It's based, if I'm not mistaken, actually on a true incident.
Yeah.
They go in South America. This kid disappears. Their kid disappears. American family is working at a construction, firm, and he disappears. And he's, raised by one of the tribes, the invisible people, as they're called. But everyone knows who they are, though. I love that. Oh yeah, it's the invisible people. But it's a beautifully shot movie and a very riveting movie. A lot of people tell me it doesn't hold up well. I've caught it on cable a couple times over the years. But I think it's Powers Booth at his best, before Deadwood is what he's really would be known for in his later years. But I found it a fascinating movie, beautifully shot, just something that you go to the movies, a big screen to see.
Shot by Felipe Russello.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. The 80s was a good decade for John Boorman with that and Hope and Glory and Excalibur.
That's like a trio of awesome films there. Yeah,
and they're all beautiful to look at, and they're all photographed by 3 different people, I think. So, I like Emerald Forest a lot too. It's funny. Powers Booth, they were really trying to make him into a movie star back in the 80s with things like Southern Comfort and
Southern Comfort's another really good. That's another great film from that time too. And then he did the other Walter Hill movie later on, Extreme Prejudice, with Nick Nolte.
Yeah.
And then he's
there's an intense set.
Yeah.
I kind of wish in Emerald Forest, and I watched it about 10 years ago. That's the last time I saw it. I kind of wish that it was a little bit shorter, and I also kind of wish there's part of me that wishes that Boorman hadn't cast his son Charlie Boorman in the
that's
because I think it's a weakness.
He cast him. He was also played the young Mordred in Excalibur, so he liked to cast him. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
He initially wanted to cast C. Thomas Howell.
Wow.
In that part. Yeah.
Oh, really? I mean,
but he wasn't. He backed out, so he had to put his son in there last minute.
That would have made it even more of an 80s movie if C. Thomas Howell would have been in it.
No offense, C. Do you call him C? Like, what do you call him?
C. I bet people do call him C. Maybe they call him Tommy or something.
My number 10 is David Cronenberg's The Fly.
Awesome.
It's one of the most amazing movies to me for this reason, because it takes this really campy 1950s Vincent Price movie and it turns it into a movie of tremendous pathos and sensitivity. What makes The Fly work for me is the fact that above all things, it feels like a very effective love story,
right?
Like a deeply felt love story, and that makes this transformation tragic. It's completely surprising. I remember watching it and feeling completely taken aback by what this movie achieves. I think it's an astounding Goldblum performance. I think it's a very good emotional Gina Davis performance. I think they're very good together as a couple. They had genuine chemistry. And it's also in the 80s, and I remember when we did our Summer of 86 show, Keith was talking about this aspect of it. Our friend Keith Ulick, who's a critic, Keith watched it, and he was kind of it brought him to an emotional place where he remembered his friends in the era of AIDS emerging, dying and decaying and wanting to be put out of their misery. And so he finds the end of that movie where the fly takes the barrels of the shotgun and puts it to his head that Gina Davis is holding. That's completely heartbreaking. And there is that element to it because, I mean, if you think David Cronenberg also evolves his own kind of obsessions because he's known for body horror. In The Fly, he takes it to another kind of dimension, and an incredibly emotional one. It's an astounding movie, and it's a movie I return to at least once a year or a couple of years.
No doubt, it's a great movie. You know what fascinates me about the film too is when you look back on it, really there's only 3 people in it.
Yeah, true.
It's really just Gina Davis and Goldblum and John Getz who has a minor supporting performance in it, really. But really, when it comes right down to it, all you can remember is those 2 people in the movie. And I
do like John Getz in it. I do like John Getz. He is so impossibly smarmy through most of the movie, and he's got these. Chris and I always make fun of his line readings in that movie because it's incredibly slimy. It's a personal favorite Cronenberg film for me.
No, it's a great film. It's a truly good film.
Great summer for 20th Century Fox too, because if you remember, they released The Fly and Aliens the same summer, and
right.
I remember them advertising them together. These 2 great hit movies that just great stuff. All right, so Jerry, your next choice.
My next choice will be a film that I've talked about, I think once before on the show. I think it was that first year we were doing I guess sleeper films or something, or films that not many people have heard of, and I'm sure people have heard of this. It's Where the Buffalo Roam, probably the first Hunter S. Thompson movie. I would think. This is 1980. Bill Murray as Hunter S. Thompson, and he's famous for saying you really never get Thompson out of your system, and obviously Johnny Depp can attest to that, having played him twice. This movie, because I don't remember it in the theaters, but we rented it on VHS, and it's one of these films. I think the theme of my list is these are films you just went back to the video store and rented constantly. Mm-hmm. I mean, just constantly, and this is one of them. And this also has a great performance as Peter Boyle as Laszlo, his attorney, and it's just I can never stop laughing during this film. It is so funny, but it's also one of those films that made me want to be a writer. And it's God, how long ago did I saw this in 1984? Yeah, and I remember I went to the bookstore and bought Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and loaned it to Steve and never got it back and had to buy another copy. Read Hell's Angels that summer, and I would go back and read all this stuff again, but I just was blown away by Bill Murray's performance. And this was the summer of Ghostbusters, so we had seen that a lot of times, and Stripes and Meatballs, what have you. But it's just a crazy, crazy movie, and it's a movie that some people don't like at all. They prefer the Johnny Depp Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which is an equally brilliant film. And then there's The Rum Diary, which is I think maybe the best of them. But I love it. It's just a personal favorite of mine. I have it on VHS and DVD. So
directed by Art Linson, the famous producer, actually.
Yes, the Art Linson. Have you ever read his autobiographies?
That Whatever Happened was based on?
And also A Pound of Flesh, which goes into the making of The Untouchables.
Oh, I really want to read that. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's a crazy book. But he's
man, everybody's writing books about the scandalous makings of De Palma films, The Devil's Candy and The Untouchables, and
Devil's Candy is the blueprint though of those books.
Yeah.
That's the best of them. That's a fascinating book.
Yeah. With music by Neil Young in Where the Buffalo Roam.
That's right, Neil Young. That's absolutely got it.
Now, is that
a blueprint of my future life, all there in one movie.
Is that a full score? Is it a song score? Is it a? backing score, or because I've never seen the movie. I've always kind of stayed away from it because it's got such a reputation. It's got it came out in 1980 though, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
It's got kind of a reputation as being, well, when it came out, it didn't get great critical response.
No,
so.
It did. I remember the other movie that Art Lindson directed was the sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, The Wildlife.
Oh my God!
Wow,
yeah.
I didn't even know about that movie.
Yeah, and that's the other Art Lindson movie. And another movie that we rented from the video store constantly. Oh God, with Chris Penn, may he rest in peace. When you can't get the brother, get the other one.
Oh right, so yeah, Chris Penn.
Oh, he was in the sequel the first time.
He was.
Okay.
Yeah, he was. They got Chris Penn instead of Sean Penn.
Yeah.
Wasn't that kind of like the breakthrough? Well, I guess Footloose was his breakthrough.
I think Footloose was definitely his breakthrough. The Wildlife was not anyone's breakthrough.
Slow times at box office.
I mean, here's the double feature for you: Wired and The Wildlife. There you go. That's the double feature. All right.
80s classics. Okay, Dean, you're number 9.
Number 9 is just a masterpiece of filmmaking. It's from 1985. It's by Terry Gilliam, and it's Brazil. One of the few movies that I've ever seen where just every single shot there's something interesting in it. And I remember sitting in the theater. I don't think that Terry Gilliam was on my radar as a director, even though I admired, of course, Holy Grail and Life of Brian, but those were directing pieces that he had done with Terry Jones. But this was, of course, his breakthrough, and one of the interesting thing about it was that the film actually was a story before it actually hit screens, because as we all know, Universal was going to cut it up and said that it was too long, and they were going to cut it up and release it and just dump it. And Gilliam actually stole a print of it and showed it to the Los Angeles film critics, and they decided to give it Best Picture, rightfully so. And then finally the whole film got the release that it deserved. It's just such an imaginative movie that takes cues from so many other movies too at the same time. I mean, of course, it's kind of a spoof of 1984, but it's got elements of, for me, it's got elements of The Road Warrior and Marx Brothers movies, and also, Casablanca. There's tons of film references in it. So it's really a film lover's movie. But that aside, it also feels completely original. Its creation of that sort of world that feels like sort of I don't know, it feels like the Russians won, and everything is, the Russians won the Cold War, and everything's just kind of falling apart, It's kind of it's a dystopian future, but it's a future where everything seems to work for a little while at least. But it's with all the ducts and all the wiring that's behind the walls and everything that just kind of can't keep in, and it's just popping out all the time, and and then the lead character, played by Jonathan Pryce, who's just the sort of nebbish that finally learns what's behind everything and suffers consequences. And that incredible climax, sort of a dream on top of a dream, and you're kind of wondering, I remember watching it wondering, my God, where is this going, And when that final shot comes in, it's just devastating.
Oh, it is.
So,
it is. Oh, I remember watching that at home and just like, wow. Yeah. Can
you believe that they wanted to cut out, the ending of the movie and put on they wanted to just slap on a happy ending to it, and I just can't imagine the world without Brazil, which I just think I think it's also an incredibly influential movie, and it has very much the flavor of 80s sci-fi. I mean, it does feel like it comes, it does feel like it's of a piece of something like Blade Runner or something like that. So it's just terrific. I love it.
A piece of trivia about Brazil, Terry Gilliam said he was so stressed during production that he lost all feeling in his legs for a full week.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think? I don't think there's
any production that he does not stressful. I mean, is it like?
I think he prefers it like that. I think that's the way he likes to make
Dr.
movies.
Parnassus must have been incredibly stressful. I mean.
Yeah. All right, my number 9 is Broadcast News.
Cool.
Which I think is one of the smartest movies of the decade about character, and I really like James L. Brooks, his feeling of character, his sense of character, and the kind of open-eyed look at their faults, each of these characters, and their virtues. I really don't feel as though he judges his characters. Very smartly written movie about big media, the people that populate it, but it's really a movie about relationships. And each of these 3 leads in the film, they feel so specific. And it's one of the great female characters, I think, from this decade as well, and Holly Hunter, this ultra-determined news producer who doesn't have a life outside of her job because she's her own worst enemy, because she sets her standards far too high. And there's just revelatory little character moments in the movie where she'll just take time out. She'll look at her watch when she's alone in the hotel room or sitting on a pier or something, and she'll say, "Okay, I have a minute or so," and she'll just start sobbing, and then she'll wipe away her tears, and then she'll just go back to work. That's what's great about when it works. That's what's great about James L. Brooks' writing. It's incredibly truthful, and at the same time, it's genuinely funny.
Right.
He doesn't lose any feeling of truth in trying to get a laugh. The truth comes out of the laughs, which I think is incredible.
I also think in that movie that he uses William Hurt, who is also one of the big actors of the 80s. I think he uses William Hurt to his best ability in that film. I mean, sometimes I feel like William Hurt's a little stiff, and I like how he's cast in Broadcast News because he is kind of stiff. But I mean, that's kind of what makes him kind of a huge success in some ways, because he's kind of playing at being a journalist.
Right.
I think thematically the movie is quite interesting because we know that James L. Brooks started off in news, and that's kind of what led him to start doing the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which actually took place in the newsroom as well. And so the movie is actually about, to me, is about less about relationships. I think the relationships are kind of a mirror of the theme, because I think it's more about what do you value? Do you value truth and integrity, or do you value kind of a surface kind of success? And I think all 3 of the characters, including Albert Brooks, who we should say gives one of the great supporting performances of the decade.
Absolutely.
In the movie.
I completely agree with you that that's the theme of the movie. But
yeah.
but the way it expresses that theme more than anything is through these specific relationships.
Yeah, it never preaches. It never preaches to you or anything.
Yeah,
right.
But it is a movie that's ahead of its time and showing us that, because remember, it came out in '87, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It is a movie that kind of predicts the move over from news on news shows to entertainment.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was a metamorphosis that was on people's radar back then. And when you go back and look at it, you go, oh my God, television is totally about that. Television news is totally about that little scene that she shows. You remember there's that scene where she goes to the symposium or whatever, and she shows this was what was on the news, and it's just one of those tremendous domino chains that's going, and
people are loving it in the audience.
People are clapping and loving it, and she says, "Oh, I hope you enjoyed it, because you're going to get a lot more of it." Instead than one woman says, "Good,"
it's a great, and it's deliciously entertaining. I mean, it really is. It's not any kind of boring character drama, or if somebody out there hasn't seen it yet, I mean, go see it. I mean, it's infectious. Go see it. I mean, buy it. It's not like you can go to the theater.
I was really impressed with Criterion actually coming out with, because you don't think of James L. Brooks and Criterion going together, because James L. Brooks doesn't seem like a very cool filmmaker now.
Criterion going together. So, I mean,
well, that's true. I think they did that for the cash, but they're obviously not doing this one for the cash. I think.
Well,
I think
and he has the bravery to end it not necessarily on an audience-pleasing note. I mean. I love the way he ends it too. It's very adult.
Yeah.
The way he ends it,
And it feels like a novel on film too. That's another thing about it. It's got that kind of really substantial kind of thing to it that makes it feel like you're reading a really great book while you're watching it.
Yeah. So, Dean, what's your next choice?
Number 8 on my list comes from 1989, and it features, it's by the director that you consider the great director of the 90s, but for me, this is the beginning of it all for him, and that's Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Never before had I ever... Well, I'd never been to, I watched it in New York, and of course, it was the summer of '89 in New York, and everybody was afraid there were going to be riots in the theaters and so forth and so on. There weren't any riots in the theaters, although it should, if there had been, I wouldn't have been surprised. But it turned out to be not as hot of a summer as is depicted in the film. The film, of course, takes place over one day in the neighborhood of Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, and I just watched the 20th anniversary, disc of the movie, and was completely. I felt like I was watching it again, for the first time again in some ways, because I hadn't gone back and taken a look at it for a little while. But I'm really taken away by the sort of operatic tone to the movie. The kind of everything's ratcheted. There's a certain sense of realism because they did shoot it on a block in Bed-Stuy. So there is that realism there. But then with Ernest Dickerson's kind of color-drenched photography, and then with the very specific way that Spike Lee directs his actors, where they're just on the verge of overplaying everything, but he pulls them back at just the right moments. And of course, the movie is famous for its incendiary ending, where Spike Lee playing Mookie, who's the delivery guy at the pizza place run by Danny Aiello, who's amazing in the movie, actually incites the riot that actually destroys the pizza place.
Right.
That's the setting of the whole thing. And that sequence to me just opens this one ending, this one thing opens up a world of discussion about the relations between the races in this country.
And it closes, I mean, after the end of the movie, it closes with two seemingly opposing quotes from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, which kind of spell out different ways to approach the race issue. But the movie doesn't give you the answer. The movie just gives you those two viewpoints.
Yeah, and I mean you got to hand it to Spike Lee too, because Spike Lee does his answer. His answer is with the Malcolm X side, but he doesn't force his answer onto you. He makes you decide what you think, and there's just so much nuance. Plus the cast is ridiculous. I mean, when you got a movie with Denny Aiello, Spike Lee, John Turturro, Richard Edson, Rosie Perez, and Oscar Davis, Ruby Dee, Robin Harris. Unbelievable cast. Martin Lawrence, John Savage. Ridiculous how many people. Frank Vincent. It's absurd. It's such a fun movie. It's got tons of great music in it, particularly my favorite movie song of the 80s, which is Fight the Power by Public Enemy, which is possibly the most important and most... I mean, I've never heard a song in any movie that's... I think when I was listening to the commentary, they said it's used like in 40 times in the movie. And you never get sick of it. It's an amazing piece of rap music, and it has a great credit sequence with Rosie Perez dancing to it. That's just unforgettable.
Yeah, no, that's an incredible sequence. I mean, you got Sweet Dick Willie in here, but the most important thing in the movie is actually you realize watching the movie, my God, Spike Lee watched, before, in between Scorsese and Tarantino, it's often forgotten. Spike Lee loves movies, and there's also something else he loves more, maybe than possibly Woody Allen and Scorsese combined. He really loves New York.
Yeah, he's one of the modern quintessential New York directors.
But this is something
without
he doesn't get the credit. I mean, he really, because a lot of people. I mean, before this came out, you had School Days, where he was raked over the coals. I'll never forget, at Howard University, there was something on one of the PBS stations here, and it's at Howard University, and the students and the faculty were giving him the hardest fucking time about the movie. They were they wanted to basically crucify him. How dare you make this movie? So he was already, and if you know what the movie's about, you could understand he really riled the African American collegiate community with that movie. He really.
Well, I don't think that they liked having a mirror held up to them and showed that there was racism within even their own community with the light-skinned blacks and the dark-skinned blacks.
Yeah, I mean that was a fascinating thing. But then he makes this movie, and he would just go on. I personally think he get better and better. And he doesn't get, he doesn't. The sad thing is, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves, because there is something that, how do you say this? He sort of predicted his own demise with Bamboozle. I mean, Bamboozled is really about, if you really think about the foreshadowing of Tyler Perry. I mean. That's what it is. I mean, unfortunately, I hate to say that, but it kind of is, because Spike Lee is no fan of Tyler Perry.
Yeah,
he's made that very clear. But he's definitely one of the brightest filmmakers we have, and I just feel he never gets his due.
I think that's the main thing that he doesn't get credit for. There are two things that he doesn't get credit for a lot, one of which is his compassion. Mm-hmm. The compassion that's there in all of his films, and I just had in mind and secondly. The diverse kinds of films that he makes.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Summer of Sam, 25th Hour, He Got Game, Inside Man. I mean, he's an incredible filmmaker.
Yeah, Summer of Sam never gets the credit it deserves. That's an extraordinary film.
Yeah, I think so too. That's one of my favorites of the 90s.
Yeah.
But it's in Do the Right Thing the traits that I love most about Spike Lee's work. First of all, he's one of the most exciting visual filmmakers out there.
He is.
And secondly, I love how in all of his movies, his characters will go on rants that aren't paramount to the plot.
Right.
But they speak volumes about the character, about that world that they live in, about that environment, about their views on all kinds of things. I mean, it almost feels Altman-esque in a way. it gives you such a sense of that, of those relationships. And they're not talking about anything that's necessarily essential to keep the plot moving either.
I agree with that. He's just a really fascinating filmmaker, and what was the last film he made?
Well, he's got one coming out.
I know he's got one coming out.
He's got a nominal sequel to Do the Right Thing called Red Hook Summer.
Right. But even stuff like personal stuff like Crooklyn, I find engaging. And then speaking of a movie that Clockers, isn't it? He directed Harvey Keitel. And while not a great film, it's still an interesting film. And there's another film he doesn't get the credit for working with across the lines with everyone.
And actually, Clockers contains one of his most ingeniously staged sequences, where Harvey Keitel's telling the boy what story to tell.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Oh my God, the way he visualizes that is gorgeous. And probably the biggest thing I love about Spike Lee is he's not afraid of being completely bold in his choices. If you look at something like the end of Jungle Fever, where the prostitute approaches Wesley Snipes, and Wesley Snipes grabs her and screams, and the camera sweeps from up above down towards them on ground level. If you look at the ending of He Got Game, where the son or the father throws his basketball over the prison wall, and it lands on the basketball court where his son's playing in college. The laws of physics mean nothing. These bold, kind of very symbolic things that he puts in his movie that just bleed passion for me.
Also, another thing about, if I'm talking specifically about Do the Right Thing, is I'm fascinated by his ability to. Obviously, it's got a great script. He was one of the two Oscar nominations that Do the Right Thing got was for his script, and the other was for Danny Aiello's supporting performance. But even though there's a very tight script, and you sense that, there's also room for improv in these scripts. You feel like there's, in the case of Do the Right Thing, there's the contribution that Robin Harris as Sweet Dick Willie puts forth in the film, and you get a real sense that a lot of that came from an improv session between he and the other two actors. But also, the character that Roger Smith plays, Smiley, is a character, he's the sort of slow-witted character that's carrying the pictures of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King throughout the entire movie and trying to sell it to people. That character didn't exist on the script level. That character actually came from Roger Smith, who demanded to be in the movie and hounded Spike Lee over trying to get into the movie. He said, "Man, I just don't have a role for you." And he said, well, let's make a role. And that was the role that they made. Now, that's amazing to know, because that role seems so absolutely essential to the film and to the film's theme, that it seems impossible that character could not have been written in the script. But according to both parties, this was something that was invented on the set. Yeah. And also, finally, Ossie Davis's role as the mayor in the movie. A lot of that came from Ossie Davis himself, including the phrase "Do the Right Thing," I think, came from Ossie Davis. Within that tight structure, you feel so much life coming through in the film.
Yeah, it's a lived-in movie, definitely. Yeah. Jerry, what is your number 8?
Yeah, I guess we got to speed this along. We can't talk about. I love talking about Spike Lee, but all right, you can't have an 80s list and not have a film starring this man, and that would be Mickey Rourke. And this is the tough choice. What film do you pick? Well, there are 3 important films, but I'm just going to go with one towards the end of the decade.
And did he wash his hair in any of these 3?
His hair changes color in many of them. In Year of the Dragon, it keeps changing color, but I'm not going to pick that one, even though that might be my favorite one, my favorite Mickey Rourke film of all time. Yeah. I'm going to go with my other favorite, and that's Barfly, where he plays Charles Bukowski And the making of this movie, I mean, the books written about this film are fascinating, but this is just one of those great performances. Never a dull moment. Now, you might think a movie about a drunk is boring, but not in the hands of Mickey Rourke, and especially not when he's playing Hank Chinaski, Charles Bukowski's alter ego in all his fiction. And the movie never gets old. It's hysterical, but it's also very moving, too. And it's a great primer, a great introduction to Charles Bukowski, and God knows it was for me. And he's just, he's wonderful in it. I mean, it's one of Barbara Schroeder's best films.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it's Mickey Rourke. It is Mickey Rourke at his goddamn best, I think.
And talk about bold.
Oh yeah, Charles Bukowski was not exactly a handsome man.
Well, and talk about bold. I mean, his way of playing that role.
Yeah.
That kind of hunch.
Different from Ben Gazzara or Matt Dillon.
Yeah.
Matt Dillon, and then those are both awesome performances, by the way.
And that voice of his is like this all the time. And he's paired with, Faye Dunaway. I mean, you don't have a movie about one drunk. You have a movie about an alcoholic couple.
The toxic couple of the decade.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful movie, and you do wonder if because Sean Penn, we were waiting for Sean Penn to make Women into a movie. Charles Bukowski's Women into a movie, and Sean Penn, I'm sure, will want to play Hank Chinaski as well. So that's got to come sooner, hopefully sooner than later. But this was one of the first ones I saw, and this was my introduction to Charles Bukowski, and I don't think I'll ever forget it.
Yeah, it is a very good movie. I rewatched it a couple of years ago, and I was very taken by it.
A drink for all my friends.
And it's a great Dunaway too. I mean,
oh, it is, yeah.
She's obviously the faded beauty that's now in the position that she is, and it finds humor in the misery, as you said. Very good. My number 8 is no surprise. I've talked about all these movies quite a lot on the show.
That's good.
But my number 8 is Clean and Sober.
Oh, that's a great one. It's the opposite end of the spectrum, almost.
And this is our category dedicated to drunks. This is, I think, it's one of the most underrated performances of this entire decade is Michael Keaton in Clean and Sober. His kind of frantic energy in this movie plays in a very special way. He's a drug addict and alcoholic who sleeps with a girl that happens to OD in his apartment, wakes up next to her dead body. He's trying to flee from the cops and from responsibility, so he checks himself into a drug rehab clinic, a 30-day clinic where he can remain completely anonymous and no one can find him. He thinks it's kind of an ingenious plan, but it sets him off on a path that teaches him a lot about himself and the nature of addiction and makes him own up to the lies that he's told in his life. But it doesn't wrap it up in a neat little bow. I mean, there are very complicated relationships here. And it even veers off from simply being addicted to drugs to being dependent upon other people and how that can be dangerous as well. Kathy Baker, who was, she did a lot of great work, especially in this period. She's terrific in the movie. Morgan Freeman is terrific in the movie. Emmett Walsh has a great...
he's my favorite thing in the movie. I mean, I love the movie, no question about it. I love it for the performances, chiefly. But I think his performance is just superb. He's definitely an actor that was shining in this era, and he's just so perfect as his sponsor.
And he's great. He's a great balance because all the scenes are with Michael Keaton. It's a great balance between their two energies as well. I love the movie. It's got a very bleak, gray look to it. I mean, you feel that environment very palpably.
Yeah.
And it's a Glenn Gordon Caron film, and actually Glenn Gordon Caron created Moonlighting, and then he did this movie, and it didn't do well at all. And so he really didn't go back to making films. He went back to TV, and Medium was the last big show he did. I've been trying desperately to get a show about Clean and Sober. and I'm going to do that sometime in the future. But Michael Keaton considers it one of his, best. I mean, he's very fond of the movie too.
Right.
I think he won Best Actor from the New York Film Critics that year for both that and they also cited Beetlejuice in the same. So he did both of those performances.
I mean, to do those in the same year is quite a feat. He's another actor who does not get his due.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great dramatic role from Keaton, but it doesn't abandon all of his gifts that he brings to his other kinds of films that he's better known for. It's an astounding movie, and actually Bruce Willis really wanted that movie, and they kept offering it to Michael Keaton, and Michael Keaton kept turning it down. And Bruce Willis saw Michael Keaton in a bar one night and said, "Man, you're absolutely nuts if you don't do this movie." And so he finally agreed to do it, and I'm glad he did. It's a remarkable performance. That's my number 8. Jerry, what's next on your list?
Oh, God, well, we talked about Barfly. Let's go with Alex Cox, Repo Man.
Okay.
Repo Man is superb. I didn't really realize I did not know. We talk about all these guys. We talk about Spike Lee. We talk about all these guys watch so many movies. Alex Cox is another one who watched a lot of movies, but also brought a lot of punk sensibility to his obviously his future films after that, Straight to Hell and Sid and Nancy, and then went off into really crazy territory with Highway Patrolman. And he still makes movies, but I don't know. I haven't seen any of these recent ones. He made the movie The Winner, if I'm not mistaken, with Michael Madsen sometime in the 90s.
I remember that.
Excuse me?
I remember that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one of those movies. I remember I recorded, videotaped it off the movie channel one night. If that says anything about how long ago it was, but Repo Man, I still think is Emilio Estevez's best role, his single best performance, and obviously Tracy Walter. But it's a perfect 80s film about punk. Mm-hmm. It's just perfect. And this is another one of those movies. I watched it the same summer as Where the Buffalo Roam. This is the first summer we joined a video club. We had a VCR that worked, actually. Or no, it was just the VCR I broke. It's one of those top loaders. It might have been the VCR I broke, the Hitachi I finally destroyed a couple years later from overuse. It ate, movie it ate? Angel Heart. I was watching Angel Heart for the millionth time, and it ripped Angel Heart apart, the tape. But Repo Man is perfect. And obviously you see traces of that in Richard Kelly's films, and in Pulp Fiction you see traces of Repo Man, but in Repo Man you see traces from Kiss Me Deadly, of all films. Yeah. So it's just, I love that movie. It's the perfect LA movie.
Ranked number 7 on Entertainment Weekly's top 50 cult films of all time.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. It's got a great source music score to it. Produced by Michael Nesmith of the Monkees, and the supporting cast, including Tracy Walter, who to me, when I think of Repo Man, I think of Tracy Walter.
Oh, it's his movie. He's so over the top, but so in a different kind of way, though.
He's understated and over the top, and the character's over the top, but he plays it sort of understated to me.
Isn't Cy Richardson also in Cy Richardson's in this?
Cy Richardson and Harry Dean Stanton, of course.
No, it's Harry Dean Stanton. Oh my God! It's like one of the 80s were his, like, between this and Paris, Texas. I mean, my God.
Yeah. Yeah, he's another character actor that was really shining in that era too. But and just the stylistic touches that Alex Cox puts on, like the generic brands on everything that's on the shelves and stuff like that, it's kind of unforgettable. My only problem with Repo Man, which was actually the first movie that I reviewed back when I started reviewing movies for my college newspaper, so I'll always remember it for that and remember it fondly for that. But when I rewatch it again, I feel like the last 30 minutes gets a little sort of over. I don't know. I'm not really interested anymore in what's in the trunk of the car.
Well, you're not supposed. I don't think you're supposed to be what's in. Don't you think? Isn't that the whole thing in Kiss Me Deadly? Remember in Kiss Me Deadly, you don't.
Well, the only problem with that is I think that Otto as a character gets kind of lost. Emilio Estevez's character gets kind of lost in the flood of characters that comes in that last 40 minutes. Because there's a ton of new characters that come in that part that are not in the first part of the movie.
Right. Of course.
I tend to my most fond memories of the movie actually tend to be kind of front loaded in its first hour, and then its last 30, 40 minutes is not as strong.
Did you ever see Alex Cox's Repo Chick from a couple of years ago?
Oh my God!
Did he really make that? Is that a real?
Yeah, 2009.
Is that available on DVD or?
I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. I just pulled it up and it doesn't say. But
okay, because he made so many small. He makes a lot of. He's made a couple Spanish language movies.
Yeah. Including Highway Patrolman.
Yeah, that was the first of those, and it's like interesting because here's a guy who really was cutting edge and everything, but with each film, I mean, Straight to Hell maybe is one of those cases like too smart for its own good, and the problem with Straight to Hell is it's such an inside joke. It's like the precursor to Kevin Smith's career. It's such an inside joke. No one got it.
Straight to Hell also suffers from that party movie syndrome. It's like a movie that's kind of, hey, let's make a movie and have a party at the same time, and we'll invite all our friends, and they'll be in the movie. It's sort of like the.
How did Courtney Love lose all that weight? Was it Coke? Was it the Coke that made her? I mean, because you watch that movie, and then you see the years later, Courtney Love was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It's a great advertisement to be Coke.
She's in Sid and Nancy too, isn't she?
Yeah, she plays one of she plays one of her Chloe Webb's friends, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mm-hmm,
yeah, right, exactly. I like Sid and Nancy. I still think that's
okay. Quick 80s story about Sid and Nancy. So we're watching Sid and Nancy at David Mendelsohn's house, and I explained the ending to him, and this is what he said. Isn't that a little deep for a Sex Pistols movie? Okay? I just want that on the record, on this show's record. David Mendelsohn said, isn't that a little deep for a Sex Pistols movie? All right. And I was like, okay, I'm going to shut up from here on out.
Does that have an ambiguous ending? I don't remember the ending.
No, but remember they in the end it's like the afterlife you say, and
Oh, I see. And the Frank Sinatra.
He goes to the junkyard. He goes to the junkyard and gets out of the taxi. He goes to this junkyard and gets into. He starts dancing to a disco song with two little black kids in the junkyard. Yeah. And that's really the ending of the movie.
But I just explained it. I gave my own theory. I was like, is that a little deep? Is that a little bit too much? I'll never forget that. Then I tried to get them to watch the Vikings with Kirk Douglas. That was a huge failure. I mean, that was like the same week. That was a huge.
That one, but I couldn't get with you on that one because
no, but I mean, it's a fun movie. It's a fun movie. I just couldn't even. Everyone went downstairs and played pool. So did me.
Why don't they have that double feature at the New Beverly or something? The Vikings and Sid and Nancy. All right, Dean, what's your next choice? Your number 7.
My next choice is the only movie that I ever went to go see where people were actually dancing in the theater. It was made in 1985 by Jonathan Demme and Talking Heads, and it's their concert film called Stop Making Sense, which I still look at as being the greatest movie on 2 levels. It's a great concert movie, obviously. The filmmakers it really feels like, well, Jonathan Demme told the photographer Jordan Cronenweth, who also did, Blade Runner and Peggy Sue Got Married in this decade. He told Jordan Cronenweth to focus only on the band, never take any shots of the audience, forget about all that stuff. And just with that simple direction, you really get a sense that you're actually there watching this incredible performance. Mm-hmm. On top of that, the performance actually feels like it's telling a story with the way that they bring each member of the Talking Heads out onto the stage. First, David Byrne with his solo performance of Psycho Killer, and then Chris Brands, the drummer. Then they bring Tina Weymouth out next with Heaven, and then they bring Chris Brands out Then they bring Jerry Harrison out. Then before you know it, there's 12, 15 people up on stage, backup singers and the secondary keyboardists, and it's a great movie about the mix that came about, particularly with this band, by mixing punk and soul.
Right.
And you really, in its own way, it's a movie about the relationship between the races, and in some ways, it's kind of if you look at it that way, you have to look at it as being a positive movie about the relationship between the races. But I don't want to read too much into it. Mainly, it's a tremendous visual and auditory treat. I mean, it's just. And every single shot is just beautiful. Every single piece, every single song has its own sort of directorial character to it. And we have to remember, it's not just a Jonathan Demme movie. It's actually credited to both him and the Talking Heads.
Mm-hmm, right.
So, and I just think that it's unbelievable. It got a lot of there's even that one scene where David Byrne goes off the stage and they give the stage to Tina Weymouth and Chris Brands, who were doing the Tom Tom Club at the time, and they get to do Genius of Love, their most famous hit. And even that scene, I think, that even though it got kind of drubbed for being, that slows the movie down, I don't think so. I think it shows that this is a band. That's another thing. The movie is very interesting in that it's talking about being a band, what it takes to be a band.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's ironic that, only about 3 years later they were broken up. I think they broke up right after True Stories came out.
I think you're right, yeah.
Like around 89 or something like that. So it wasn't too long before. But we can always go back if you ever feel like you've never seen, if you're a Talking Heads fan or not a fan, particularly if you're not a fan.
I have the cassette from them. I have the soundtrack from that, the cassette.
Yeah.
Still.
And unfortunately, the soundtrack only has like 9 songs on
right,
it.
Yeah.
It's kind of truncated. But if you're not a fan of Talking Heads and always wondered, I've always heard about them, well, go and watch this and you will become a fan, because I was not a fan. I mean, I was just kind of a nominal fan before, but this just kind of cemented it for me. To me, they are 80s music at its best,
and timeless too. I may add, you see this they play. There's a song on the Talking Heads that's played in the trailer for "Seeking a Friend for the End of the World," and their music has been very cinematic pop music. It has a purpose thing to it, and plus that's not right. David Byrne if I'm not mistaken, he did the soundtrack to The Last Emperor, right?
Yeah. Right.
So he are also really the Talking Heads for incredibly influential band. I mean, you just have to go listen to James Murphy and LCD Sound Systems.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very strong Talking Heads.
I love David Byrne, actually.
Yeah,
and
great.
I've bought a lot of his solo stuff too,
mm-hmm.
and I mean he taps into a Talking Head sound a lot in some of those albums. I remember he composed the Big Love too. Like he was he composed a whole season of Big Love, I think. One thing about Jordan Cronenweth, the cinematographer of that film, and of course he did Blade Runner. David Fincher idolized Jordan Cronenweth and brought him on to do Alien 3.
Right.
And they were working together for the beginning of that production, and people said Jordan was the only person that he ever kind of knelt to, was deferred to a lot. But he wasn't in great health, and so he felt terrible. But for his safety, he replaced him.
Oh.
And it's interesting to note that David Fincher's cinematography is Jordan's son, Jeff. His cinematographer that he used career-wide is Jeff Cronenweth. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Also, some news that I just saw, unrelated to this, but this will take just 1 second. I thought this was fascinating. TMZ, they interviewed Benicio del Toro.
I saw this. Yeah.
Outside of a restaurant, and they had no idea, but he's standing next to Terrence Malick. So
my God!
It's like the only live footage of Terrence Malick in like Forever and a Day.
Yeah, but they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know. I mean, that's all.
No, I mean they wouldn't know, but that's great.
I know. I saw that earlier. I was like thinking, like, what would you if it was like attention or something? You wouldn't know. I mean, you just. It's like
not. Interviewing like I don't know, like Lindsay Lohan outside of a club, and she just happens to be standing next to Howard Hughes.
Exactly. I mean, oh my God,
that's amazing. Okay, to save time, I'm going to do my next three together: 7, 6, and 5. And there's a reason for this beyond time saving because they're all Spielberg films. Number 7 for me is Empire of the Sun, which I'm always been incredibly fond of.
Mm-hmm.
It is a perfect combination of the grandiose and epic Spielberg and the very intimate, and I think it's one of the most special depictions of a child transformed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it's a great balance in Spielberg's career between his movies that feel more about childhood and the movies that venture off into very adult themes. Because this kid goes from a privileged, snotty, but he lives in his head and his dreams as a child, and then he goes to the World War II camp, and he's transformed, so that by the end of it, his parents don't even recognize him when he's reunited with them. It has flaws, but there's such passion and
right. No, of course,
and beauty in the movie. It's one of the most gorgeous movies I've ever seen. I've always been crazy about it. And Christian Bale, finest child performance I've ever seen in that film. Number 6 is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and I know I'm in the minority.
No, you're actually not. Because it gets better.
Okay, all right.
This is my favorite of the series. It is the most gleefully fun for me, the most nonstop action-packed, like balls to the wall, just have a good time and grab onto your seat movies. And it's
why we have PG-13.
Yeah, but it's scary. And
it is scary.
Well, let me say it's scary and it's gross out in the way that a 12-year-old considers something scary or gross. It's that kind of mentality.
I always think of the monkey brains in it. I'm eating the monkey
bug
brains
scene,
in that.
Man, the scene in the bug.
And the bug scene, yeah.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you could see 12-year-olds like, what's grosser than gross, like eating monkey brains or bugs, or like trying to stick your hand in like some roach-infested thing, and the action in this movie is unbelievable. And
it's crazy.
I still, even though I part with you, I'm really liking the movie because I don't really like the female lead, Kate. What's her name? Kate
Capshaw, Mrs. Spielberg.
Kate Capshaw, Mrs. Spielberg. Now, I don't think she really works in the movie, especially after watching Karen Allen and Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I do think that the opening sequence that takes place in that sort of shining white ballroom where there's a diamond and it gets lost in a bucket of ice and they're searching for it on the floor while all this chaos is going on. I do think that's one of Spielberg's greatest sequences.
Yeah,
no question about it.
I think these are all awesome choices, and I have a question for Jamie at the end of the show about Empire of the Sun, but we're not going to do it right now. We're going to do it.
We can do it now.
Okay. Should Christian Bale come back to play reprise his character in the sequel, The Kindness of Women?
I never read it.
It's a great book, J.G. Ballard, great book. But I just think since we've been, you don't know what I did last week. If you knew the amount of time I've devoted to the sequels thing, you'd have me locked up. But that was the first thing that came to mind. Should Spielberg go back? Because Ballard's no longer alive; he just passed away. But get Christian Bale because he's not going to be Batman anymore, and say, "Look, let's do this."
I don't personally know what Spielberg necessarily thinks of Empire of the Sun. I mean, it was not successful necessarily.
Okay.
And it felt like among the precursors to his more serious work.
But it holds up better, I think, on repeated viewings. I mean, for me at least, it gets better and better.
It's obviously one of the Spielberg movies that I'm most fond of.
Right.
but it wasn't well received necessarily. I mean, people were they're either middling to it or they loved it.
Its thunder was kind of stolen by Hope and Glory, John Borman's Hope and Glory.
Well, sort of, but it's also stolen by The Last Emperor too, because they all came out. Well, The Last Emperor and The Last Emperor and Empire of the Sun came out around the same time at the end of the year, and that was the thing that gained the momentum. Even though I wouldn't dare put them in the same category, but
I mean, the reason I mentioned Hope and Glory is because they're similar stories. They're stories about how a child looks at the wartime.
One of the great last lines. Thank you, Adolf.
Yeah. Thank you, Adolf.
Thank you, Adolf.
Yeah, that was funny.
My number 5 is E.T. And you think of the most influential movies of this decade, and certainly that belongs right at the top of the list. But I also think it's just one of those timeless movies that will always resonate with every generation of audience. It's in a way, it's our Wizard of Oz. It's pick one of those timeless movies that kids today can revisit and still feel as viscerally as we did when we first saw it. It perfectly captures the feeling of childhood to me, and the beauty of it, and the pain and the ache of it.
Right.
It's just
perfect.
It is perfect. It is perfect.
It's my highest ranking Spielberg movie of the decade, for sure. And I do agree, it's timeless. I'm wondering though. I wonder if kids these days, because I don't have kids, so I'm wondering.
I thought you had 16 children. I heard you had many children.
I don't know who they are though, but I wonder if parents are showing E.T. to their kids. I'm not sure.
I have a story about E.T. About that very thing.
They should show it.
They should, yeah.
When they reissued it in 2002 with the dreaded walkie-talkie sequence, I went to go see it in the theater, and there were a bunch of kids there laughing and couldn't shut up, and the older people bringing their kids said, "Could you, if you're gonna talk, just get the fuck out of the movie. We're trying to enjoy this."
Yeah, obviously.
But it shows you, and it does. There are younger kids there, and they're really into it, and it is. Come on, it comes on whenever it comes on. You're sucked into it, and you can't help but be sucked into it. And I mean that in the best possible way. I mean,
and it doesn't. And this is what makes Spielberg such a great director of children. It doesn't talk down to children either.
Oh, he talks to them.
It's not a naive movie. I mean, if you think they come from a broken suburban home, and a mother that's trying her best to keep the family together, and Elliot's need for a friend. I mean, it's deep rooted in the family dynamic. It gives it a great depth and resonance, emotional depth and resonance.
I love when he shows E.T. as Star Wars figures. I always love that scene. I love that when he shows them,
showing him everything that's on the table.
Yeah,
the little Jaws thing that he plays with and stuff. It's wonderful, and this isn't said enough about that movie. That movie really depends so much on Henry Thomas's lead performance. I really remember when that movie came out, I really thought, there's no way they can't give Henry Thomas a Best Actor nomination. They just have to. And I was disappointed to see that they didn't.
No,
well, E.T. is only as believable as the context that surrounds him. And I think the actors around E.T. are what bring it most to life.
Yeah. You really do get the sense that they believe in E.T., So, yeah.
Okay. We're on to number 6 for everyone. Is that what we're on to?
Yeah.
Okay, Jerry, what you got?
I've got The Right Stuff.
Of course,
I love that movie. And it's not that I love every movie that you guys are talking about. It's just I can't put them all in there. But what I realized going back to a lot of these movies. I mean, we mentioned, because we talked about Harry Dean Stanton Reef, you mentioned Paris, Texas. I watched Paris, Texas 3 times in one night for a German film class, okay? But going back to The Right Stuff, though, just because Sam Shepard, that's Sam Shepard's best performance. I love Sam Shepard, but
you're right.
To me, he is just the personification of macho, cool, everything is Chuck Yeager. But I also think it's like, I love Ed Harris, but I think that's one of his best performances.
Yeah.
I think it's one of Dennis Quaid's best performances, and Scott Glenn. Everyone's like the top of their game, and Philip Kaufman. I mean, everybody. But it's just a fantastic movie. I don't know if it can be. I don't know if it could be made today, but
it's very ambitious.
Yeah, I gained a lot of respect for that documentary you recommended a couple of years ago to the show, Fog City Mavericks.
Right.
They talked about Philip Kaufman and Khalid Deschanel and everything. He was a cinematographer in that, and just incredible, beautiful movie. We went to go see that a lot of times in the theater. That was even before.
Did you ever see it in 70 millimeter?
Yeah.
I saw it on my birthday that year. That was my birthday movie that I insisted we go and see, and we went into it, and it was like completely, there wasn't anybody in the theater. I was like, man, it's not doing too well. That's too bad.
Yeah, no, they bungled that movie, unfortunately, because I think they wanted to use the part of it was they wanted to use it as like a campaign movie for John Glenn at the time, and I think that really hurt. Because I remember my mom turning to me and said the scene where John Glenn gets on the phone and chews out John, tells her, you stand up to Johnson and everything. My mom's like, he's got every woman voter he wants,
Well, you know what? I mean, that film is a great large canvas, ambitious piece of Americana,
right.
And it's a great expression of the American dream. But what's more, it's a great expression of the perversion of that dream.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I consider since it came out in '83, and I think that all decades, the ends of the decades bleed over into the next one. I don't think a decade actually begins until the third year of that decade. So, but it's also to me like the last great '70s movie, with quotes around '70s movie. It's kind of the movie that kind of gives way to the Reagan ideal of patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, you're right.
But yet it still has that cynical edge to it, that the '70s is famous for. Boy, another movie with just an incredible cast. When you're sitting there watching this movie, you're like, oh, there's 1,000 people in this movie. I mean, Harry Shearer and Jeff Goldblum, those two wacky characters in it. I love how the movie doesn't shy away from having, very significant scenes of humor in it. I mean, and even bathroom humor.
There is bathroom humor.
There's a lot of it in it.
Yeah, there is.
It's wonderful how it doesn't overcoat the thing with patriotic glee or whatever,
Right.
But it is an amazing movie, and Caleb Deschanel is really one of the heroes of that movie too. But
it's
also
beautiful.
Bill Conti's score, which won an Oscar along with the sound and editing of the movie.
Right.
And actually, I think the special effects in it are interesting too. So it's just it's a great movie. What are you going to say?
Okay, Dean, what is your number 6?
Number 6 for me is another great big-time epic from the 80s. It's Warren Beatty's 1981 movie Reds, which was nominated was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, including 4 for Warren Beatty, who was producer, lead actor, scriptwriter, and director. He eventually won Best Director, and also winning an Oscar for the movie was its photographer Vittorio Storaro, who we've talked about on this show before. I think it's Storaro's finest work, and that's saying a lot. But it owes so much to how committed and passionate Beatty was. I mean, think about how difficult it was to create a movie in this era that was about a communist sympathizer who eventually learns that communism isn't going to work, really. But it's about a communist sympathizer that's I mean, the movie, I think back then cost $60 million, which would be, probably like $300 million today. And But also, I love how the movie, even though it's shot in 18 different countries, and it's 3.5 hours long, the movie never forgets that it's about the people. It's about this love story between John Reed, played by Beatty, and Louise Bryant, played by
Diane Keaton. Yeah.
And it never forgets that it's really about it's a relationship movie about committed political intellectuals, and they're never talked down to. They're always treated they're treated very fairly, and the movie also at the same time evokes the bigness of a director like David Lean and its in its war scenes and its crowd scenes and its protest scenes. You really get the bigness of this movie while feeling that you're also just in a room with these people, and an amazing supporting performance by Jack Nicholson as Eugene O'Neill. He has some of the best scenes in the movie. Also, Maureen Stapleton, Emma Goldman, she won an Oscar as well. But also another movie with just tons of people in it: Gene Hackman, George Plimpton, Jerzy Kosinski, Paul Sorvino.
That's right.
Emmett Walsh is in this one as well, just for a second.
The Emmett Walsh show, we should call this.
And then finally, just the choice of kind of the really, really bold choice of framing all of this with this, bald-faced documentary footage of the people who actually knew in real life, Reed and Bryant, and are reporting to us as quote-unquote witnesses to, they are billed as the witnesses. And they are real people. I mean, Henry Miller is one of them, Hamilton Fish, and George Jessel is one of them. But that aspect of it, to me, really puts the movie over into, like, this is something I've never seen before. It's not just a relationship story. Now it's not just an epic, but it's also a documentary at the same time. And it does this so successfully. It's a brilliant movie.
Two quick things about Reds. Warren Beatty is the only person to be nominated for Best Picture, for producing, Best Actor for his performance, Best Screenplay, for the same movie, and he's done it twice with Reds and Heaven Can Wait.
That's right.
Another thing about Warren Beatty, apparently Jack Nicholson was so good in the rushes that he saw that he said, pick the ones where he's not so damn good, because Warren Beatty knew that he was going to be just wiped the hell off the screen, apparently. So there's this big argument scene between he and Diane Keaton, Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton, that he really cut back, because apparently Nicholson was like completely on fire in some of those takes, and he said, no, he'll steal the movie from all of us. Just put it down. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, Jerry, what's your next pick, your number 5?
That would be Stripes. And you knew it was coming. It had to come. I mean, I don't know. I've talked about it so much on the show and everywhere else. It's one of those movies that just gets better and better. But it's another one of those movies, like when it first came on videotape, we would rent it constantly, and you quote it from it. And it's just very, I mean, I was very influenced by a lot of the, like, obviously the Bill Murray movies of that time and the John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd movies of that time. If this was the 70s, I'd probably put Animal House on this list, but it's not. So, but yeah, it's just, that movie to me is the all-purpose. I mean, even more so, I think, than I do like Ghostbusters, but I think this even holds up. This, for me, is Murray at his best in those type of films. And he's just so funny. Now, I will say this, though, having watched the uncut version a couple of years ago, you didn't need any of that stuff. It was fine the way it was. I'm not going to lie to you. But that movie is timeless. John Candy's funny. God, he's no longer with us. Harold Ramis is good. Warren Oates is hysterical. John Larroquette, Judge Reinhold. Oh my God, it's class. I love that film. I just love it.
I do remember watching that movie over and over again at the theaters because I was working in theaters at the time, and always really enjoying the film. But I do have to say that's another movie that I feel its best moments are loaded in the first half of it. And
you don't like the urban assault vehicle? I think
it's just a little lost in plot. I know,
but I think one of the best scenes is when he gets out of the thing. He gets out of the truck. When they're in the Russian base, and he has the bottle of vodka, and he's going over to the other guy. And he has no idea what he's doing. He's just giving him the bottle of vodka, and like how Remington said, "Look at me, I'm an idiot. I'm gonna get killed."
I also think that movie has a terrific supporting performance in Warren Oates.
Yeah.
I mean, this was close to Warren Oates' last movie, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. This is towards the end, yeah.
And
what's his last? What's this guy? He was in the Osterman Weekend, wasn't he?
Yes.
So that would be that would be I think the final.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't actually.
I get confused.
I didn't remember him in that either.
After Stripes, he did The Border and
that's like The Border. Okay, yeah, that's
The Border, yeah,
and Blue Thunder and Tough Enough. Tough Enough was his last movie.
All right.
I just assume everyone's in the Osterman Weekend. It's such a misguided.
Yeah.
What a mess.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's terrific in that.
Dean, you're number 4. No, it's 5 or 4?
Number 5.
Oh, okay.
Number 5 was easy for me to pick. It's from 1986. It's by David Lynch, and it's called Blue Velvet. And talk about a movie that I think this movie actually changed movies in a lot of ways. I think that this movie actually told everybody that it was okay to be dark, to go ultimate into the darkness, of things. At the same time, the movie has incredible moments of lightness, because it's really about the battle between light and dark. It's the overworld, the kind of sunny 50s era kind of world that Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern inhabit. And then there's that underworld with, of course, Dennis Hopper and Isabella Rossellini and all those other great character actors in there, Dean Stockwell and Jack Nance and Brad Dourif, and in that way, the movie is kind of a commentary on the Reagan era, I think. It's like, in the Reagan era, people were trying to convince people, hey, let's go back to the good old days. Well, this movie kind of shows that there was never any good old days. There was always darkness lurking underneath even the most innocent looking of towns.
Right, you're absolutely right. That's a great point. That's an awesome point, Dean.
The photography in it is by Frederick Elms, and he's really. I remember going into the movie. I was going to NYU at the time, studying film, and I dragged people to see it, and they were like, I don't know, I don't want to. Some of them were kind of square. They didn't know David Lynch or whatever. They maybe knew Elephant Man, but that was about it. And I took them to this, and I remember I got, strange glances, because I came out loving it, and everybody was like, I'm not sure how I felt about that, and some of them just absolutely abhorred it. But I was like, no, this is a great movie, no question about it. This is, and then, let's talk about Dennis Hopper in that movie. I think that might be the greatest supporting performance in the decade.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
the greatest comeback performance of all time.
Yeah. It's in the pantheon of great characters in movies. Frank Booth has to be up there. He's just unforgettable in the movie. You just cannot. You cannot even gauge how great that performance is. That same year, he also did Hoosiers.
Another great performance, and couldn't be more different.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly, and that's the performance. I guess the Academy was afraid to give him a nomination for that, although they did go out on a limb and give one nomination to the film to David Lynch as the director of the movie, which is pretty rare to see a movie that just gets one nomination as best director. But God, I mean,
it is a great movie.
Really, Hopper owned that year.
He really did. But Lynch, I mean, he'd just come off of the massive disappointment that was Dune, and it was a big disappointment for him too. Mm-hmm. He obviously wasn't happy with that movie himself. So Blue Velvet, I still think Blue Velvet is structurally his best film, his most cohesive vision. And he's always been obsessed with that kind of contrast between the light and the dark, and can love exist in a violent and vile world, and the dark underbelly of the kind of ideal American facade. I mean, that's what he does, and I think it comes through loud and clear in Blue Velvet. And I think The Wild at Heart is about the same thing too, as Blue Velvet, kind of the same themes.
Well, that's a movie that grew on me as time went on. That's another film. I figured that would be on your list, Jamie.
It's my number one favorite movie of the 90s.
Good. I have a question. I have a question to ask you about that too. So.
Well, when we do our 90s list,
when we get to that,
we'll do it.
Get to that.
Okay. My number 4 is Blowout.
Awesome.
Brian De Palma. Dean mentioned something about Right Stuff being the last movie of the 70s, really, to take place in the 80s. I've always felt that way about Blowout. Blowout, I think, is the last great paranoid political thriller of that 70s period. And
you're right.
And I really don't think, we've been talking about kind of the Reagan era, I don't think any movie expresses that sea change as much as Blowout.
Foreshadowing what's to come.
Yeah. And talk about devastating. This is a guy that gives up by the end. There's no kind of he's fighting for justice. He's fighting to do what's right, to uncover conspiracy and wrongdoing. He's a crusader in a way, and then he suffers just one too many losses, and he just gives up. And the true screams of horror that he records are used to sell a scene from like a grade Z horror movie. It's given to the service of consumerism. There's all kinds of symbolism in the movie, right from her screams when she's being murdered at the 4th of July parade, or being muted by fireworks, and she happens to be murdered right in front of a big old American flag. I mean, it's all the way through. I think it's one of the great political thrillers. I really do, and my all-time favorite Brian De Palma film, and a great Travolta performance too.
It's my favorite De Palma film as well, and I do love him, but I also love Nancy Allen in it, who is extremely lovable in it.
One of our greatest interviews. That was a fascinating interview. That was just fascinating.
But she said, "Well, Brian De Palma is a misogynist."
That was wow, okay. I spit out something while she said that.
I was like, you do know that you're part of a tribute to Brian De Palma.
I would have put this on my list, but I don't think I saw this until much. I didn't watch it. I mean, I watched it, I think, in the 90s.
Right.
And I remember seeing a trailer for it when we went to go see like History of the World Part 1 or whatever. They showed a trailer for that, for Blowout. So
it's an incredibly scary trailer,
too. It is.
Great
it's
trailer,
one of the great trailers. I also, I think that movie has so much. I think Blowout has so much great directorial trickery in it that's just so fun to watch. From that scene where where Travolta is looking for the tapes in his sound room, and the camera goes 360 degrees, over and over again, and the use of split screen in it, which is of course a famous De Palma trademark.
It works so well there.
the only thing that the movie actually owes to Blow Up, some people said that it was a remake of Blow Up. No, it's not. But
no, it's not. It's really not.
But there's that scene where he puts it all together, where he puts the movie is brave enough to actually have a sequence where he works in putting it all together through film and sound and everything, and syncing up the sound and so forth. And it doesn't shy away from showing you the process of his discovery.
Well, I think that's important too.
Yeah, it was the only thing that it shares with Blow Up as well.
I think that was important too, because it's a movie about process. It's about the power of sound and imagery together. So you could say it's almost the process of what De Palma does best. But in the movie, it's used as a way because the media is trying to sell this a certain America to us, as our politicians are. And it to express that process is another way of expressing how we're being manipulated by it. I think it's a brilliant movie. Jerry, what is your number 4?
This is a last-minute choice from the last couple of days, but I think it deserves to be on here because just the discussion that followed it when we went to go see it, and I miss it because we haven't done this in like 30-odd years, but it's Full Metal Jacket. The first half of the movie is frightening. When you're like a 15-year-old kid, that's scary. The first half, I'm not saying the second half isn't, but my mom has always said it's like 2 separate movies. And she still stands by it. But I like it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Platoon too. I mean, we saw that the same year. But Full Metal Jacket was just fascinating and there are parts of the first half of the movie where I'm just cold. I am just scared shitless by Arlie Henry. I mean, just he's a monster in that movie, and but it's a fascinating movie. It's something you could watch. Actually, it's really funny, Jamie, because I was going through coffee table books on our coffee table, and one of them is Matthew Modine's Full Metal Jacket Diary. I was listening to that earlier today, and I mean, there are other movies I could definitely put in here, like Aliens or something. Or I was even thinking Tequila Sunrise, but I just think it would be disingenuous since we've done this whole thing on Kubrick. It would be that Full Metal Jacket did have an impact, a very, very powerful impact on me. It has one of the great, what is it, the tagline in Vietnam, the wind doesn't blow, it sucks. And it's a frightening movie, and I just was riveted the whole time. I'm just like glued to the screen. And where did we go? I don't know, where did we go after? I think we went to Hamburger Hamlet. Yeah, because that was right in the same theater, that theater that no longer exists. And we just had this long talk because there's stuff going on in Central America. There was possible Middle Eastern involvement too, with Iran at that time in '87. There was always something going on. So it was just like,
well, some things never change.
Yeah, some things never change. But there was there was Central America was still kind of a lot of people, the Sandinistas, Nicaragua, and also before that it was El Salvador. So there was always just like a lot of crazy talk during that time. A lot of crazy talk. Always, because what you learn is always crazy talk. But the movie is just it's like nothing I had ever seen before.
Yeah.
At least for me, I had never seen anything like that.
And
a lot
of study about the movie now focuses on its portrayal of masculinity, of masculinity and femininity, and a lot of people just think it's a great depiction of gender and what it means to be a man, and what they try to sell you on what it means. There's a lot to explore in the movie.
Oh yeah.
I just. Do you think it's one of his lesser efforts, though? I mean, a lesser Kubrick is as brilliant anyone else is, but
it's the first half is really, I think, the film's strength. I think the second half, ironically, when you get to the actual war part, it loses something. It almost feels, oh God, how do I say, pedestrian?
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel like? Well, there are obviously some classic Kubrick touches, like where the guy picks up the stuffed animal and it's a mine blows up. I mean, you have stuff like that, and obviously the scene where the hooker's walking down the street is a great sequence. But overall, it's really the film is you talking. Dean used the term front loaded. This film is the first half is really, I think, the film's genius.
I think it's it's an interesting movie too, because it's really, when you look at it, it's really only a 2-act movie. It doesn't have a third act.
Right.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
That's something that makes it feel very weird. It's like when it ends, you're kind of like, oh, that's the end or whatever, But it's correct in doing that, because for the people who fought it, and survived it, even coming back home, still they were kind of fighting the war in their own heads, because they weren't welcomed home like World War II heroes or whatever. So there is no end to it, really. There was even in historical with the perspective of history. Looking back on the Vietnam War, it just doesn't really seem to even have an end, really.
Right.
It just sort of petered out,
right?
And so there were no winners, there were no losers, and so that makes the lack of a third act actually quite understandable, because the third act kind of determines who's the winner and who's the loser, in some ways, and there weren't any.
No, you're absolutely right, Dean. That's a very good point.
I guess the reason why I've been kind of shuffling my feet on doing the next episode of the Kubrick series, and why I just went ahead and released all the uncut interviews, is because I don't quite get the appeal of the second half of it yet. I mean, I don't feel it yet. I don't feel the second half of that movie yet.
No, it's almost like I said, another movie. Really, it seems like another.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the one thing about the second half of it too that might help be the cause of your feelings towards it is that really in the second half of the movie there are no feelings expressed, really. I mean, the only feelings that are expressed are towards its last, few minutes with the dilemma over the sniper girl that they have to.
Right.
The way I feel a Kubrick is by getting on its wavelength intellectually, and I haven't figured out how to do that with the second half of that movie yet. So I mean that's where I'm coming from. So are we up to your number 4 now, Dean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 4 for me is from Ross McElwee. It's the only documentary in my top 10. It was released in 1986, and it wasn't his first film, but it was his breakthrough film. It's called Sherman's March.
Oh, okay.
It tells the story of Ross McElwee is the filmmaker and narrator, and he is somebody who lives with the camera on his shoulder. And so he's really documenting his own life. It's one of the few successful autobiographical films that I've ever seen, because a lot of times they get too indulgent. But it's not something that you see very often, in documentary film is the autobiographical thing. But this film is so great. It starts off with Ross in Boston. He's a native Southerner, but he's in Boston. He's just suffered a breakup with his girlfriend, and he decides to go back home to kind of heal up over it. Goes back to the South and expresses his loneliness to his sister back there, and his sister sort of starts him on this journey of meeting women and gives him pointers about how to improve his appearance, and you need to take the camera off your shoulder and everything, but that's the one thing he can't do, is take the camera off. He can't. He's really going down. He's nominally going back down south to trace. He's planning to do a documentary film about the Sherman's March through the South during the Civil War, but he gets distracted by his loneliness, and the film really ends up being a movie sort of paying homage to the appeal and the sort of the unusual craziness, I suppose, but also just downright appeal of Southern women. And so the film also touches on things like the terror of nuclear annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
It actually has a sequence where he goes and visits one woman who is involved in the survivalist commune that's up in the mountains, waiting for the end of the world so they can survive it, and it has great moments with all kinds of different women. There's a rocker that he falls in love with, is just playing little bars and so forth, and so you get the raucous kind of women, but you also get sort of a kind of a charming Southern belle who wants to be in the movies and is into trying to get into a Burt Reynolds movie, and actually Burt Reynolds shows up in a small cameo in it, and the movie is it just feels, there's something about Ross McElway's voice. He's got this kind of slightly Southern tinge, but very, very soft, soothing kind of voice, and it kind of controls the movie. And you really kind of get hypnotized by this film. He's done sequels to it. He did a sequel in the 90s, which is one of my favorite movies of the 90s, called Time Indefinite. Then he also did a thing called 6 O'Clock News in the late 90s. That's kind of a third segment there. He doesn't do movies that often. His last movie was in, I think, 2005. It's called Bright Leaves. But he's somebody he's somebody that I always wait to see what he's doing next, because I always find him fascinating, and I just love hearing his voice, But it's a very unusual movie. It's called Sherman's March. You should check it out.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Good.
His last movie was called Photographic Memory. It came out last year.
Oh, yeah? Okay. All right, cool. I have to look for
All
that.
right. My number 3 is The Accidental Tourist. I've talked it all to death in previous shows.
Yeah, that's a cool one. That's a good one.
I just think it's one of the most beautiful movies, tonally, from this period of time. It's my favorite Lawrence Kasdan movie. It's my favorite performance of the decade, my single favorite performance from William Hurt. I think it talks about grief in a very unique and special way. It celebrates the eccentricities of its characters without, making fun of them. I mean, it's very loving to the people in it. And that's my number 3. I don't need to talk about it anymore because I've talked it to death.
That's a good choice.
I watched it again the other night because I just bought a VHS copy of it. I mean, you're going to hate me for saying this, but I kind of feel the same way I did about it back in the late 80s when it came out. It's a movie that just doesn't get to me like it does to you. I know that it's an acclaimed movie and everything, but there's something that's holding me back from actually embracing this movie. There's something. I don't know. It's for me. It feels a little dull. And what I mean by dull is not just in a pacing kind of thing, but also like the way that it's shot. It's shot in a very odd way and art directed in a very odd way. It feels like a period piece in some ways. It feels like it takes place in the 60s or whatever, but it doesn't. And it's shot like it takes place in the 60s too. It's shot in that sort of burnished brown kind of thing, and all the color is kind of drained out, which is by design, obviously, because the color's been drained out of this man's life. But for me, it doesn't. I don't know. It's a tough movie to get through, and I don't think that it's. I don't think that its appeal is universal, but there are obviously huge fans of it, and it actually got a Best Picture nomination that year, and won, I think, the New York Film Critics or the National Board of Review as Best Picture.
Yeah, I think its themes are universal, but no, I don't think that the approach the movie takes is necessarily universal. But I was on its wavelength. I mean, I feel Accidental Tourist, and I feel it in a very muted way because the movie is very muted. I mean, if it looks like a period piece, I think that's probably because these characters live in another time,
right?
Basically almost another world. where they're stuck. But there's something. There's this feeling, just dying to get out. There's this catharsis, just dying to express itself, and it's there in William Hurt's performance. I mean, it's all so under the surface in his performance, and that's what it is with Accidental Tourist for me too. So what number is that? 3. Okay, Jerry, what's your number 3?
Oh, by the way, I like Darling Companion. Okay,
did you like that?
I just think I threw that in there. After this weekend, how could this not be my number 3 or my, Blade Runner? How could you not?
Yeah.
I remember we saw it opening night, and the movie theater up the street, and we waited in a long line for it, and it was just like a fascinating movie. I can't say I understood everything the first time I saw it. I won't lie to you, but it was just such a crazy movie. But the one thing you walk away with, now this is the first film I'd seen from Ridley Scott. I had not watched Alien yet, and obviously I had not seen The Duelist, but it was, for me at least, a watershed moment because I'd never seen something that visually arresting like that. And his vision of the future was new to me. It was a rainy, and that's something in Prometheus too. There's rain when you go in that ship for the first time.
Right.
Rain. So he likes rain as a common motif in his films that he likes to use, but it's there. His view of the future is very rainy, very wet, very damp, and I saw that obviously with Alien when I watched that a couple of years later. But it's not just. It was also a different role from Harrison Ford. We're used to seeing Han Solo or Indiana Jones. I had no idea who Rutger Hauer was or Daryl Hannah or any of these people, but it was just like, wow, this is such a crazy movie.
Another M. Emmett Walsh, by the way.
Yes, it's M. Emmett Walsh night at Movie Geeks United. But I did not know also that at the time I had no idea that the ending was from the outtakes of The Shining or whatever. I had no idea. I would not know that at the time. But it's a great movie.
Well,
I can't wait to see what he does with the sequel.
It's one of the great visionary movies, and it's a game changer in terms of the genre. I mean, it's a standard setter in terms of the genre. I mean, there's no question about it. Its influence is massive.
Now, this is summer of '82. The trailers, oh my God! You would, looking back, you're like, I died and gone to heaven.
Right.
The trailers for the movies that summer. I mean, it's just like, oh my God.
For me, the movie feels like it doesn't really have much of a beating heart. It's
a cold movie. It's a cold film.
As the years have gone by, I've come to really appreciate that because I always thought the movie actually feels like a replicant. Like it's imitating a movie that could have feeling.
No, remember, it didn't do well. Remember, it's a dud.
Yeah, but it's not really.
It's a commercial disaster.
But that's kind of what I dig about it now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the feel of the movie kind of embodies the dilemma of the movie. Yeah.
It's not an easy movie to watch at first, It's definitely not, It's a different kind of movie, especially for me, because I'm used to, Star Wars or something of that nature,
Right.
I'm really used to a very thought-provoking film like that. But it is a cold movie. It's a very cold film.
I want to take issue with the fact that it's a cold movie. I think after watching it so many times, I've watched it many times on the big screen. Whenever it comes out, I would imagine that it's not going to get re-released again. With another director's cut. This thing has had at least 3 director's cuts to it. But after I watched it again last week and watched the 3.5-hour documentary about the making of it.
That's right. You were watching a documentary. That's right.
And first of all, just the work, the fortitude that it took to make the movie on the part of Ridley Scott. He would not back down on anything, and absolutely had to okay everything that went into it, down to the logos on the taxi cabs and things like that. So. And everybody was fighting him, studios, producers, Harrison Ford, but everybody buckled down, and it's one case of a movie where it was done under great duress, but it actually comes out quite successful. But there is a lot of emotion in the movie, I think. I really feel the emotion between Rutger Hauer in particular. I really feel his even though he's the villain, quote unquote, I feel that he is not really a villain, really. I think that the villainy comes from his incredible desire to want to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that desire comes from his relationship with Pris, played by Daryl Hannah. And when Pris, fights the big one in the movie, very memorably, her death, you can really feel the loss that Rutger Hauer feels. So he's not the normal villain, and then of course when you get to the final scenes and you really discover his love of life, and that's emotional too. And you feel the emotion, and now we know. I truly believe, by the way, it's funny in the documentary they don't really discuss this too much, but I really believe that Deckard is a replicant, and I just don't see any way around it. He has to be one. And with that in mind, watching it again, you really sense in those scenes between Hauer and Ford, you really sense that Hauer's character is Roy Batty is really trying to portray something to Harrison Ford's character. You really feel like he's saying, "Look, you're going to get through this too," and
that's
you
an
just better
interesting point.
Be prepared for this because you're going to hit it.
I mean, if Harrison Ford's performance were more colorful in the movie, it would come out stronger, even if you could consider him human, because that could also be read, if Harrison Ford is a human character, as a non-human teaching Harrison Ford how to be more human, which has its own kind of drama and irony attached to it. Number 3, Dean, what is your number 3?
Number 3 is from 1982. It's from Scotland. It's by Bill Forsyth, the greatest Scottish filmmaker out there, and it's called Local Hero. It tells the story of a Texas oil executive played by Peter Riegert, who is put on a mission by the owner of the oil company, played by Burt Lancaster, in a great supporting performance. He's put on a mission to go to Scotland to buy up this beachfront property in order to drill for oil on it. And Riegert goes to this small Scottish town, which is in the typical Bill Forsyth sort of way, is quirky and funny and lots of weird little characters going through it. And he falls in love with the town so much so that he starts to doubt whether he's living the right life, whether he's there's a point where he's ready to, he's drunk with the mayor of the town. He's drinking with the mayor of the town. He's fallen in love with his wife, sort of, and he says, Gordon, I'll trade. Peter Riegert says, Gordon, I'll trade everything. You can keep the Porsche, and it's a great life back in Texas, Let's just trade everything. And let's trade. Oh, is the wife included? He says, yeah, the wife's included. I have to have the wife. And great Chris Minchie's photography, along with Killing Fields, his best work of that decade. One of the most moving scores, probably my favorite score of the 80s, from Mark Knopfler.
Yeah. That's right.
And the score is kind of beautiful, sort of, it feels kind of, the score itself feels kind of rain-swept in its own way, but it also, with a lot of sort of mournful kind of keyboards and stuff like that and guitars, but also there's great exuberant sort of Scottish party music kind of played all the way through it too, that has great authenticity to the place where it's set. And another thing about the movie, you could kind of look at it as just being sort of a comedy, just comedy about quirky people or whatever. But it has a huge undercurrent of concern about the environment and how the effect that we have on the environment, and to the point where you've got a business trying to come in and destroy the town basically, and the townspeople are willing to give it all up because they want out. They just want the money. But also, there's a nearby military base where they're dropping bombs on the countryside and so forth. It's just a kind of just a very rich movie about a lot of subject matters, both personal and big, all thrown in there. But you can choose to look at it like that, or you can just sit back and laugh and smile and feel really good and enjoying this movie. So if you've never seen it, Local Hero, number 3 on my list.
Local Hero. Jerry, what is your number 2?
The Road Warrior. Yeah, you can't.
You know they're shooting Fury Road next week, right?
Excuse me?
You know they're shooting Fury Road next week, right?
And with Mr. Tom Hardy, right?
Yeah, they're starting it next week.
Oh, good for them.
Charlize shaved her head and everything.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Now, let me ask you this: is this a sequel? It's not a
No.
It's a reboot.
Yeah, it's a complete reimagining. It's not even the Mad Max character that was set up at all. It's kind of a different take.
It's in the same world, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the same world, but it's
story,
a different take. Yeah.
All right. Well, obviously you
Warrior.
can't get Mel to come back for it. I remember when it's really interesting when Fury Road was first announced with Mel Gibson. They gave a thing that the whole series had made $67 million altogether. What makes the Road Warrior so incredible? I mean, like I said, we saw a trailer for the Blade Runner, and I had not seen Mad Max. We had friends of ours who went to a drive-in theater in Delaware to see Mad Max and said, "You got to see this movie, man! It's incredible."
That's a good drive-in movie.
It's an awesome drive-in movie.
Both of them are, yeah.
Yeah. But that's another thing. Wow. Now this is another one of these things where we went to see this at the Avalon, and then we went to go to the Peking, which no longer exists. But that was a great movie. The way it opens up, you have the 16mm strip of what's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that anymore.
Yeah.
And then it's wall-to-wall violence. It's got some funny moments to it. But as far as action goes, this is like you've never seen. At least I've never seen anything quite like this. I mean, just the love of American cars in an Australian movie. I don't think I've ever seen them. Forget the Cannonball Run movies. The love of American cars in this film is incredible. But this I would be willing to say this is Mel at his best. This in the year Living Dangerously and Gallipoli, but I would have to say Road Warrior, and I like the first Mad Max too, where they went back. But there's another Road Warrior, another movie, constantly rented on VHS, constantly. But I just never seen anything like it. I remember coming home after watching and telling my friend Danny Zanger, "Oh, it's better than Star Wars." He looked at me like, "You're nuts, man. There's no way." And I was like, "No, dude, it's awesome, man. It's just awesome. It's just so crazy."
Well, it's definitely the best of the trilogy, I think. I mean, for me,
it's also the first case, because I had not seen the Godfather movies yet, but it's the first case where this and the Star Trek 2 are the same summer. And Star Trek is another movie that I was dying to put on this list too, but where the sequel is so far superior to the original film. But Road Warrior, how many pages of dialogue do you think is in the movie? Like 3 or 4?
Yeah. It's got to be. It's got to be something like 30 or 40 pages tops.
It's
very tops.
But it's a good. Let me ask you this though: do you think a reimagining is? I have no problem with Tom Hardy. I have even no problem. But do you even think it's worthwhile even doing, or maybe just call it something completely different? I mean,
it's called Fury Road. I don't know that they'll associate Mad Max with the title or even keep that character name.
Because obviously there'll be some pissed off people. I'm not one of them. I understand you got to, people are trying to. It's an odd thing to try to cash in on because they were not money making films. They were good films, but they're not blockbuster films. It's not.
Well, the thing is interesting about Fury Road coming up. You realize that there's not a lot of car chase movies done in America anymore, and the reason for that being is that there are governmental laws now that kind of. I know that in New York you can't, if you're shooting a movie, the people in the cars can't go over like 30 miles an hour. So how are you going to shoot an action movie only going 30 miles an hour?
What about the Bourne movies, though? The Bourne.
Well, they're all the same. You can't go over 30 miles an hour. It's the
yeah,
thing in LA
even Drive, they're only driving that speed.
Right. So you go back. Let's go back to. I think it's a wise idea to try and do like a sequel with the character Mad Max. Why not do a movie that takes place in the same universe but is a different character? And I think that's a very wise move.
It's a better choice than some of the other things that have gone on throughout the years. Remember, there's one with Heath Ledger was going to play Max's son, and then
Max forget
was
about all that
stuff.
Mel
Gibson. Well, you can't forget about Heath Ledger now. I mean, that's going to be pretty impossible to do. But
no, but I'm saying if you're going to go back to the well, go do it in a totally different way.
Well, yeah, you have to.
What I was getting at with the car chase thing was that what's going to be great about it is that we haven't seen really great car chases in movies for probably 15 years now. I mean, they're very few and far between. But if you go and film this over in Australia, like I'm assuming they're going to do, out in the desert, I think they can go as fast as they want,
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get back to seeing some real speed, which is the real reason that Road Warrior and Mad Max are so powerful, is that you really get a sense of speed.
Well, let me ask you this, Dean. What about the Bourne Supremacy and the Bourne Ultimatum have great, especially the Bourne Supremacy, the car chase in Moscow.
Yeah, but you never get a sense of speed in those movies because the cutting is so fast. The cutting is so fast. What you're getting a sense of is the speed of the cutting. You're not getting a sense of the speed of the thing that they're driving.
Right. Okay.
Therefore, you don't really get a real sense of danger. If there's no danger there,
I understand. I understand what you mean. Okay, I got you.
Yeah. Some of the most enjoyable thing about those movies, the Mad Max movies, are just how down and dirty they are.
They are.
It's just dirty, man. Like nasty action films. I mean, they just get down to business. They're just
there's no monkey business in those films. No monkey.
Yeah.
And if there's reason to be encouraged by them returning to the well with Mad Max, it's the fact that it's the creator of Mad Max that's returning to the well.
That is
Miller's.
Yeah.
My number 2 is Born on the 4th of July. I've never been so moved by a movie the first time watching it. I remember the first time I watched it, I actually watched it January 1st, 1990, but it was released, it's considered an 89 release.
That's okay. That's all right.
The very end of that year. But I remember sitting there, and sitting behind me was obviously a veteran. He was sitting there with his wife. And throughout the movie, I could hear him crying, and his wife saying, "It's okay, it's okay."
Right.
I mean, that kind of gave the movie experience an extra power to me. But this is one of the most passionate movies I've ever seen, and this is the Oliver Stone that I miss. This is like just a scream for what. A lot of the most powerful stuff in Oliver Stone films, I think JFK is the same way, is that he was this idealistic youth. He came back disillusioned and a country that he no longer recognized, and then he benefited from a metamorphosis where he became an activist, and that it feels like an epic journey, and it's all true, but it's like a rallying cry to invest in our country. I mean, you have a role, and it's also a very beautifully acted and directed personal story. I mean, it's such a visceral movie. I I mean, you feel this movie big time, and
Right.
even its depiction of the innocence of childhood is just way like overblown. But I love that about it. I mean, the
Right.
movie is big emotions. The John
Yeah,
Williams,
no, it
like
is. You're absolutely right.
oceans of strings and John Williams' score, and I love that about it. I mean,
No,
it's
it's
such
good.
a
It's
deeply
one of his
felt
best
movie.
films, Stone's best films, I think. I mean, that's really
I agree.
really one of his strongest films.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, an amazing performance from Tom Cruise, no question about it. Just brilliant. That was kind of Cruise's sort of graduation into, okay, you're a real actor now, kind of like you're nothing could hold him back at that point, and but it was, I remember seeing it in New York right when it came out, and it was introduced by a veteran and stuff. It was a special screening of it. And seeing it on that, it was in the biggest auditorium in New York, the Ziegfeld, and it was just overwhelming, the emotion in that movie. That scene where he comes in and he's back home in his wheelchair and finally expresses to his parents, the loss that he feels.
Right.
The fact that he feels less of a man now than when he left, and the sense of lost time and lost opportunity, and that's really the battle that he has to get over is trying to make something of his life after the tragedy of his experience there.
And it's a great picture of America and what we're going through at that time, and it's the most complete picture of the Vietnam experience, because you have the battlefield, you have the return home and the confusion and disillusionment that came with it, and then you have the kind of the rebirth. I mean, it feels like a complete meal in a way.
Yeah, you have the protest. Yeah, you have the protest in there too.
A sense of urgency in the movie that is very rare. I mean, how many movies do you see that have that sense of urgency to it?
Not many.
And this was Oliver Stone when he had to make this movie. You felt like he would fall on a sword to make this movie. And that's like a level of passion and commitment that I wish every filmmaker had,
Also, one of the few movies that's ever, I mean, if I remember correctly, in the Oscars that year, it's the only Oscar that it won was for Best Director. I don't think it won anything else. It just won for Best Director.
I remember it got for Best Director.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't win for editing or whatever, but all of that stuff is great in it, and the photography is amazing in it, and I mean, it's one of Stone's greatest movies, I think.
So what's your number 2, Dean?
Well, number 2 is the movie that a lot of people think is the greatest movie of the 80s, and it's real close to the top of my list, but it doesn't make number 1. But it's Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull, of course, 1980. The story of Jake LaMotta and his rise and fall through the boxing ranks in the late 40s and 50s. I remember seeing it at it was 1980. So I saw it at the Toco Hills Theater, which eventually would become the first theater that I worked at, and I remember going to see it for like 99 cents, This was after its initial run. And I went back probably 3 or 4 times that week to see it again. I could not believe my eyes that Michael Chapman photography, that unbelievable black and white photography with smatterlings of 8mm footage in it for color. Just everything from the credit sequence, the slow motion dance in the ring, over with that beautiful operatic music in the background, to the absolutely revelatory editing in it. I think that was the thing that hit me most, even more than De Niro's performance and Joe Pesci's and Kathy Moriarty's performance. All of them were great in it, but it was Thelma Shoemaker's editing that just blew me away. Even with all the Rocky movies and everything, nobody had ever done anything like this before. And to think that it was in the service of a character that a lot of people found, and rightfully so, found distasteful. I mean, I think that's the criticism by some people, including people like Danny Peary, who's my favorite film writer. But he doesn't really care for the movie because the character is so repellent. But I think that's the fascinating thing about it is De Niro's and Scorsese's absolute determination in trying to find the humanity of that character in there. There's a famous story where they were trying to pitch the movie to executives, and they were reading the script, and one of the executives said, I just can't see us making this movie. I mean, this man, he's a cockroach. And right there, De Niro piped up and said, he's not a cockroach. He's not a cockroach.
Right.
And you could, when in hearing that story, you can almost hear how the mood in that executive office must have just, you probably hear a pin drop in that office once De Niro said, he's not a cockroach, and I'm going to prove it to you. You're going to care about this character, and the movie does make you care and make you see his humanity, because eventually he has to own up to the notion that he's alienated almost everybody in his life, and when he gets to that point in the film, you really do feel something for him, and it's very hard for one to actually put their finger on why you feel anything important, affectionate towards this character, because he has been really rough on the people.
I mean, the notion that he comes to realize he's a failed human being.
Mm-hmm.
I could talk about this for a long time, but we can't. But my personal feelings about the movie is I agree to the letter with Pauline Kael's take on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a fan of it.
Really? And what holds you back from liking it?
The fact that not necessarily that the character is distasteful, but that he doesn't go anywhere. That it's one scene after another of the same note, and that when he finally does kind of transform into the older, fatter Jake LaMotta, it is so out of left field. Like, where the hell did this character come from? Who is this? I can't get invested in it. I enjoy the art. I enjoy the art of it. I mean, I enjoy all the technical brilliance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy the determination of De Niro. I mean, it's a completely great accomplishment that he achieves in that movie. But
no, I like the movie. I think it's a good movie. I don't know, but you notice when the 80s ended, it's like one of those movies that was on like everybody's top 10 list. I mean, one of the best films of the 80s. I do like it a lot. I don't know if I like it as much as Dean, but I do like it. I think it's a well done film. And also the thing he shouldn't be made because he's repellent. I mean, that's more reason to watch it. How often do you get to see people like that? So it's very important to watch a movie, I think, like that, if you find the main character repellent.
So
exactly. It forces you to find something about him that because you have no place else to turn. It forces you to find something about him that's worthwhile, and I think that's important and a very 70s kind of thing to do.
Right.
I mean, it's obviously a 70s movie shot in '79 and released in late '80. So
we up to everyone's number one now?
Yes.
Okay. Whew, God, this has been a long haul. Jerry, what is your number one?
Okay. Does anyone want to take a guess as to this? Because I think it's pretty obvious, but I'm also, so wrapped up in my own head that maybe it's not. But does anyone want to take a guess?
Jamie would be better to take a guess at it than I would.
God.
I think it's obvious, but it's just... But like I said, I'm so wrapped up in myself that I probably never... I don't know if I've ever spoken about this movie on this show.
Oh, well, then I wouldn't know.
Okay. It's the first VHS I ever bought. Now, that's about as helpful as getting kicked in the nuts, I guess. But it's the first VHS I ever bought. And it's a film that I would go ahead and watch endlessly to this day. It explains movies that come after it. It might be why I like The Godfather so much, because I see so many similarities in it. And it would be John Borman's Excalibur.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Then let me say something. And I always give this reason why I like it, and it sounds sadistic, but it's a movie I think where everyone at the end, when everything's said and done, everyone gets what they deserve, and it's a very frightening thing because a lot of people I admire, like characters I identify with the movie, but I do feel they get what they deserve. I think it's when King Arthur came out with Clive Owen. One of the reviews was, even though this was a thing trying to be very truthful to the historically to maybe who King Arthur was, they said stick to the legend, and I have to agree. The legend is far more interesting. What's interesting about John Borman's film, and I especially learned this after reading his autobiography earlier in this century, is that I think this is what his Lord of the Rings would have looked like, very Wagnerian. He wanted to make Lord of the Rings very badly, and he's glad in hindsight he didn't, because he said even he can see that Peter Jackson did a far better job than he could ever do. But you're given a glimpse to what it would look. His Excalibur owes a lot to, let's be honest, Richard Wagner. Maybe the best use of Richard Wagner's music outside of Apocalypse Now. But it's not just that. It's visually arresting, and I think that's maybe a theme for some of the movies I've put on my list, is just visually beautiful films. But this is definitely that, and it's interesting that this is like a who's who of who would become famous later: Helen Mirren, Liam Neeson, Gabriel Byrne. Ironically, the guy who plays Arthur, Nigel Terry, just went on to do a lot of TV work and everything, British TV work, but. There's a lot of people there. Patrick Stewart is in it. It's a great film. I never get bored of it. Never get bored of it. Never.
I'll tell you one thing. The art direction, the costume design, and Alex Thompson's cinematography, plus the use of music, not only Wagner, but Carl Orff, Carmina Burana.
Well, the best. That's what you always think of when you hear that music. I mean. Yeah,
exactly, and it's been used so many times in so many trailers and things, and I mean that movie when I saw it, it just it blew me away too. I guess I was 15 or whatever, 14. So it's a great movie for it's violent as it is, and it is incredibly violent.
Oh, it is very. Still very. I think it's still very, very violent. Watching.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but it's also just. It really tapped in. I mean, it made me actually sit down and read Thomas Mallory's La Mort d'Arthur.
I did that one night. Trust me, I did that one night. In high school, I did that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's rare for me to actually come away from a movie saying, "Oh, I've got to go and read the book. I've just got to go and read it," because I just prefer to watch another movie than go and read the book. But or I prefer to read books about movies or whatever, or about history. But
I completely understand.
But the fact that even at that young age, it made me interested in the legend. It just speaks volumes to me about the movie's worth. I think it's one of his 2 or 3 greatest movies.
Right.
Fantastic.
Okay, so number one for you is Excalibur.
Right.
2 Bormans on your list, man.
I know, and trust me, I wanted to put Hope and Glory somewhere in there too.
I didn't repeat any directors in my list because I don't believe in doing that. They have to be spaced out.
I can't space out anything, Dean.
Yeah.
I just listed my favorites, so I hit 3 Spielbergs in a row.
But your number one, Jamie, is a fascinating choice.
Well, you know what it is.
Yeah, because you said it. You said what it was.
I don't remember what it was now, but my number one. Before I tell you my number one, like I said, I just wanted to, some name check some movies in my in towards the top of the list. Just by title and director. At 25 is E.T., of course. Number 24 is Mate Juan by John Sayles. 23 is The Thin Blue Line, Errol Morris from 86. 22 is Entre Nous, it was nominated for Best Foreign Film that year, but it's by Diane Curies, 83, just an incredibly devastating post-wartime experience kind of thing. 21, The Unbearable Likeness of Being, Philip Kaufman. 20 would be Ron by Akira Kurosawa.
Right.
19 would be The Killing Fields by Roland Joffe, which totally devastated me. 18, Round Midnight, Bertrand Tavernier's movie with Dexter Gordon, great jazz movie. 17, Drugstore Cowboy, Gus Van Sant. 16, Blade Runner. 15, The Right Stuff. 14 is Chilly Scenes of Winter, which is really a 1979 movie, but they recut it and released it as Chilly Scenes of Winter, which was the title of the book that it was based on. Re-released it in 81, and it's that version that I like better. 13 would be Das Boot, Wolfgang Petersen's incredible submarine movie, which we talked about on the show. 12 would be Crimes and Misdemeanors, Woody Allen, and 11 would be Full Metal Jacket. Stanley Kubrick.
Right. Full Metal Jacket does show up. So wow, okay.
It does. But I put it a little bit down because of the second act problem.
Okay, yeah, of course. That's, all right, now I'm really curious as to hell what your number one is.
Number one is to me also an epic, but it's a personal epic. It was the last film by well, it wasn't necessarily his last movie because he made another one in the 2000s right before he passed away. But this is his last really great movie, and that's Ingmar Bergman's 1983 film Fanny and Alexander.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Which to me, there's no greater story of a family ever produced for movies. It was first done for Swedish television in a 6-hour version. It was released here, and of course, this is the way I saw it in theaters back in '83. It was released in a 3-hour version. And what's interesting about that is that it's weird. When you see the 3-hour version, you don't feel, if you've seen the 6-hour version, which is available on Criterion now, but if you see the 3-hour version, somehow you don't feel like and this is not to denigrate the 3 hours that was cut out, but somehow you feel like Bergman cut it down properly. So that makes it even kind of more of an achievement when you sit and watch the 3-hour version. But it tells the story. It's based on Bergman's childhood as part of an acting family, and it tells the story of the Ekdahl family in Sweden, and they're a famous acting family, and the patriarch of the family, the parents of Fanny and Alexander, who were the two lead children in the movie, he passes away, and then the movie gets into very dark sort of Dickensian territory almost. Mm-hmm. When the children are kind of packed up with their mother, who remarries this bishop who is, sanctimonious about his religion, but is also incredibly cold and unfeeling. Yeah. Like in the real world, he's incredibly cold and scary, even. And it's about their fight to overcome this dark period of their family history and kind of their fight to get back to where they once were. The first hour of the movie is extraordinary because it's kind of like, the first hour of, say, The Deer Hunter or maybe even the first 40 minutes of The Godfather, in that it shows this massive kind of Christmas celebration between the unbelievably numerous members of this family. And somehow this movie is able to pack in, what seems like 200 characters in it in the course of 3 hours. Somehow you just get a sense of, just even the sense of like some of the maids that service the family and stuff. You really get a sense of their characters too, even if they only have a couple of lines. But I love the sort of the ghost story aspect of it. It does have kind of a fantastic kind of veneer onto it that is was really effective when I was 15 or whatever watching the film, and to me, that movie just, unlike some Bergman movies, which most of them are great, but some of them feel like a little bit like homework. They're a little tough to get through sometimes.
Oh, yeah, no, of course.
But with this movie, I just feel like anybody could love this movie.
Yeah.
And when it gets into the third act and it gets incredibly strange, and there's a lot of stock in this movie and put it into magic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the traditional definition of magic, but it's also the magic that we put out there when we were telling stories or making movies or doing plays or doing art or making music. It's that kind of magic too, but there's also like this hard real world kind of magic that's in there that leaves you wondering, if you're watching reality or if you're watching if you're watching a representation of reality or something else. It just brings up so many kind of questions. Beautiful art direction, no question about it. Sven Nykvist's cinematography, top of the game. Costume design, music, editing, incredible cast, particularly Bertil Gouve as Alexander, and the character, I can forget the actor's name, but the guy playing the bishop is incredible in it. It's just unbelievable. If you've never seen a Bergman film, it would be wise to start off with Benny and Alexander to sort of introduce you to his the kind of feeling he lends to his movies, and then you can go deeper into the more difficult stuff. But that's my number one movie. It's undisputable.
That's a good choice. It's a really good choice.
Our good friend Joe Eisenberg would agree with you. That's his number one movie of the 80s, too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The guy that just did the review, which I still haven't read, but he did the review of movie Geeks United, I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Fanny and Alexander, you're number one. Jerry chose Excalibur. I chose The Shining as my number one of the 80s. A movie I used to be vehemently opposed to.
Really? I thought your choice you said earlier, that was you told us. Okay.
No, Wild at Heart was my 90s, my number one.
Okay, all right, yeah, you're right, okay.
The Shining is the most fascinating film ever made for me. And
I would say, yeah.
I won't get into details because we spent 2 hours and 40 minutes getting into details about it on our Shining show. I'll just say, it is so dense and so packed with detail, and details that you can read any number of ways, that it is infinitely rewarding. It is a movie, if you look closely, it will constantly reward you with every viewing. There's so many different thoughts on the film. I'll just say one section of the film and articulate some of the thoughts associated with one of the opening scenes where he goes in for his first interview. If you look at The Shining as a statement about America, capitalistic, greedy America, and how we massacred the Indians or what have you, or we took over their territory for capitalistic gain and all of that kind of stuff. If you just view it as a piece about the evils of America, he goes in for his interview at the Overlook Hotel, as Bill Blakemore said in our interview with him. See, even the stuff that Stanley Kubrick keeps from the Stephen King novel, in Kubrick's interpretation of that stuff, it leads to a whole nother level of meaning. Bill Blakemore said he thinks that the Overlook Hotel, as it pertains to the movie, represents how we overlooked what we've done to these different tribes, these different races, these different people for our own gain. He goes into the Overlook Hotel. He walks into the office. He's met by Stuart Ullman, the owner of the manager of the hotel, that interviews him. Stuart Ullman, whose initials are SU, inverted, it's U.S. What does he have on his desk? An American flag. Who does he look similar to? John F. Kennedy. What colors is he wearing? red, white, and blue. I mean, it's like, and that's just like a minute of footage in that scene, and it goes on and on and on, and it's fun, it's fascinating, it's multi-layered. I can't say enough about this movie. I think, in terms of the hold it has over me, I think it's the greatest movie of my life. As I
don't pick up an axe anytime soon and start chopping down the
as I've discovered it in the past 2 years. And
that's a fascinating transformation, metamorphosis for you, though.
And part of me thinks that one of the reasons why I'm kind of let down by Full Metal Jacket, part of me feels like Kubrick was exhausted after The Shining.
He might have been exhausted for the rest of his life, it seems, after that.
He packed everything he possibly could into The Shining. And the thing about The Shining is, it's not apparent that it's on the surface that it's packed with anything.
Right.
Really. Yeah.
Right. Right, exactly. You could just as much enjoy it, and that's the sign of a great movie, is that you could really sit and just enjoy it on the level of a horror movie, a very quirky horror movie, rather than looking deeper into it. But if you care to scratch the surface, there's a lot there.
The same thing was being said about Prometheus. Everyone's saying about Prometheus, it's ambiguous like 2001, but no. Because 2001 is a different level of ambiguity. See, Prometheus, you know what the movie's about from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's the search for kind of where we came from, blah blah blah. It articulates it succinctly in the movie. 2001, it never states what it's about. I mean, you know, it's the ultimate kind of
it's kind
ambiguity.
of like what we talked about last time or last week. Kubrick never, all these interviews, Ridley Scott is actually going into really great detail about what the movie's about and everything, or explaining it. And it's something that I said, it's like you don't, as a filmmaker, I don't think you should be so explicit telling what, because you're just giving away, you're almost making it like, why even bother going to see the movie almost,
right,
to a certain degree. As much as I enjoy some of the things that Ridley Scott is saying in this, I think he does what Oliver Stone does to a great extent too. You're just talking way too much about the movie, telling what it's about. Let the audience do this. This is
and
the
that's what I
audience
think is
job.
great. Yeah, that's what I think is great about The Shining, because
Kubrick ain't giving you anything.
He's not giving you anything, and the fact is, it might not be about anything. About any of these theories, it might just be his straightforward horror movie. We might be on the completely wrong track.
That's true.
But what's great about the movie is the way it's designed.
Yeah.
You get out of it what you bring to it.
You're absolutely right, Jamie.
And that's the greatest kind of movie. It doesn't just happen in front of you. I mean, your level of investment determines how much you get out of it, and that's beautiful.